Good evening and welcome back to another episode of Geared Toward Gear. My name is Sean and I'm so glad you're here. Today we're going to be doing a full review on the brand new 2019 release from CRKT, which is the CRKT CEO. So we'll get into the full review of this here shortly, but first just a couple quick announcements or shout outs, I guess. The first would be to Dan Hazard. He's one of the subscribers and he and I were talking about this particular knife in the comments and he had recommended it, said that he thought it looked pretty sweet, and I happen to already have one on order, so shout out to Dan, great minds think alike. And then also there's two subscribers to the channel who have recently started channels of their own. They started around the same time that I did, and that's Emery Alexander and Frederick. And so they both got 5 to 6 videos posted, and I think you might find their content interesting, so I'll leave links to their channels in the description if you want to go check them out. If you like what you see, give them a subscribe. So with that said, let's get into the review of the CRKT CEO. So we'll get the box out of the way here and talk about the knife. So this was a highly anticipated offering from CRKT. Debuted at SHOT Show just recently and has been sold out in a lot of places. But I was able to get my hands on one, and I like it in concept, but it's not going to be an entirely positive review, and we'll get to that more towards the end. But we'll start with the specifications. So I'm going to open this two-handed, and I'll kind of explain that as we get into it. But we're looking at an overall length of 7.5 inches, a blade length of 3.1 inches, and a blade height of 1/2 inch. So a really short, slender blade, a really nice looking blade shape, nice acute point there. This blade's gonna be made from 8CR13 steel, and it's got a satin finish. The handle materials are glass reinforced nylon, and they do have some interesting kind of design and texturing to them. The texturing, I'll say, is not super functional, but it certainly looks nice if you can get a kind of a close-up view of that sort of scalloped pattern there. It's definitely attractive looking for sure. It is a manual opener using a thumb stud, and we will talk about the thumb stud at length probably here in a little bit. It does have stainless steel liners, but they are milled. So if I can get a good shot of this, you may be able to see the milling in the liners there. So they did try to reduce some weight. As I mentioned, it's 2.1 ounces. It has a really nice loop over deep carry pocket clip, as you can see. And what I really like about this clip is that the screws are recessed into the clip itself. And so there's no, the head of the screw is not protruding in any way. So there's nothing that's gonna snag on your shirt pocket or your pants pocket. It's just a really sleek design on the pocket clip there. And they kind of market this and designed this so that it could be carried in a shirt pocket, kind of like a pen, whether it's a dress shirt or a work shirt, something like that. So you'd kind of carry it in that configuration. Of course, you can pocket carry it just fine, but I do really like that clip. It's, I think it could have been maybe a little smaller, just in overall dimensions, and maybe lose the CRKT logo just for those who want to be more discreet in an office setting. As the name implies, CEO, they're definitely marketing this towards the business person out there. The carry orientation for this is going to be tip down, and if you carry it in your pocket, it's going to be for right-handed carry only. Obviously, you could put it in your left pocket, but when you draw it, you're going to have to manipulate it with your right hand. So it's really not a left-handed friendly knife. Definitely geared towards the righties. So let's talk about the opening mechanism. So this rides on the IKBS ball bearings that CRKT is known for. So it does have a really smooth action. So again, with two hands, I'll kind of get it started. And it flips open pretty nice. Again, it's a liner lock. I'll give you a little better shot of the liner lock there. The liner lock is a little hard to get to because, again, they designed this to be really sleek and to not have much protrusion. So as you can see, the thumb stud does not protrude very far from the handle scale itself. There's really nothing sticking out. It's a very slender design. And so with that being the case, there's not a kind of a cutout like you would maybe typically see in a liner lock to access this. It can be a little difficult for people with big hands, but it's not a huge deal. But again, being on ball bearings, it's pretty smooth and it'll kind of wiggle shut on its own, which is nice. So overall, I really like the design, the form factor, the aesthetics. I like the texturing on the handle scales. It's just a really handsome, good-looking gentleman's or ladies folder. Certainly could be used in the executive or business setting, but could be an EDC knife just as well. I mentioned it's 8CR13 steel, which I've mentioned in previous videos I'm perfectly fine with at the price point that these come in at, which is about $39.99, and that's US dollars. So about 40 bucks will get you one of these. And for that price, for the features you get, the ball bearings and the nice clip and just the overall design, I think it's a fair price and I'm fine with that steel. Again, just keep in mind you'll have to touch it up pretty regularly if you use it often. However, with this design and with the function that I think CRKT has in mind, I don't see this being a knife that's going to get a lot of heavy use. It's a pretty delicate user in my opinion. So let's look at the blade again. So this blade slices extremely well. I've used it to cut open a few boxes. I've opened several letters with it. It's a ideal letter opener, frankly, based on the kind of the short height of the blade itself. So, in that functionality, I think it works really well. It does have a flat grind, not much of a flat to be used for sharpening if you have any sort of consistent angle sharpening system. When it came out of the box, it was not razor sharp. It had a decent edge, but I think the grind was a little rough. And if I get in close, you may be able to see the bevel there. It's just not ideal. There was a couple kind of micro burrs that were catching on some paper when I was doing some tests. So I simply took it to my leather strop and it worked beautifully after that. So you may have to strop it out of the box, but otherwise it came relatively sharp. It'll cut. And again, that nice acute point is gonna be good for piercing and really delicate work. And so I definitely like the nice acute tip on this particular design, if I can get it to focus. So I like the concept, I like the design, I like the look, but I really do not like the way this action works. And this is probably not going to be the case for everybody. I have extra large size hands, as I've mentioned before. I have really large hands, and so being that this profile here, the width of the knife is so thin, there's not a whole lot to purchase on in order to get access to that thumb stud. So I tore up my thumbs using this knife for the last several days. My right thumb in particular just kind of took a beating. And actually, even just touching my thumb with another finger, it's incredibly sore. I've probably opened this 100, 150 times in the last 2 days as I've been carrying it, and it's painful. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, the way the thumb stud is designed, as you can see, it does protrude from the frame itself or from the scale, but not by much. So if you look at the thumb stud in its open position, you can see that it's got kind of the main shaft, and then you've got the kind of stair step piece at the top, and it nests into this recessed area here so that it's not protruding too much. Again, this is designed to be put into a shirt pocket or something like that, so they don't want it to protrude a whole lot, which means there's not a lot to get a purchase on. In addition, if you look at this cutout, it's got a very specific kind of angle to it. And so when you deploy the blade with the thumb stud, you have to be mindful of what that angle is. So it kind of angles up slightly, and so you really have to push the thumb stud in that direction for it to deploy properly. And so for me, with my big meaty hands, I've just found it very difficult, and I can do it, but it's really painful actually on my thumb to deploy this with the thumb stud. And for a while I just couldn't do it. I literally could not deploy it. But I kind of finally got a rhythm down where I use the side of my thumb. So instead of using kind of the top or the meat of your thumb like you might normally use on a thumb stud opening knife, I'm using the side of my thumb, if you can kind of see that, and pushing it out in that direction. And that works. However, while doing that, if you look at the bottom of the knife here, kind of the bolster at the end, if you will, it's really kind of squared off, and it's not beveled, especially on the corners. And so it's pretty sharp actually. And so when I hold it in my hand, this bottom portion of the knife just digs and digs into my palm. And I think it was yesterday I sat there and opened this like 50 times in a row, tore up my thumbs, and just had these kind of deep gouges in my palm. You can probably see one right there, from the way it kind of sits in my hand in order for me to open it. So as you can see, I've kind of got my fingers as much out of the way as possible, and the butt end of the knife is just kind of digging into my palm. And that's really the only way I can get it to open with any reliability. So for people with big hands, I honestly would not recommend this knife. It's quite challenging to deploy. Once it does deploy, it locks up nice and strong. There's no play whatsoever. I mean, it's a really, really strong lockup. And to disengage it, it's super smooth, but just getting it open for someone with large hands is gonna be a challenge. So do bear that in mind if you're looking at getting a CRKT CEO, because they're just not friendly for persons with large or extra large hands. And again, that's due to this dimension here, right? So if this dimension was wider, there would be a lot more area to purchase onto, but just the way it's designed with my hand, it digs into my palm, and just, I mean, you can see just from the few times I've opened it on this video, it's really digging in pretty hard. And I've tried other grips where, you know, it's not digging into my palm, and then it's, you know, still kind of difficult to deploy. So I'm not loving this knife. I probably will not carry this knife often. I may end up giving it to my dad or to one of you maybe. I'm not quite sure what I'll do with it. But I do not see myself EDCing this knife really at all, frankly. And again, your mileage may vary based on the size of your hands. I don't want to discount the knife completely, but when I have used it, the last few times that I've used it, I have simply taken the thumb stud with my left hand and opened it kind of as a two-handed opening knife. Just the deployment for me doesn't work at all. And I've read other similar complaints from other people who've reviewed the knife, or in forums or Facebook groups. That seems to be a common complaint about this knife, is that if you have big hands, the thumb stud, the way it's recessed, there's not a lot to purchase, and it's just a bitch to open, to be honest with you. And you can make it work, but you're gonna tear up your thumbs. So not a huge fan of the deployment method. I think if they had made this a really, really kind of understated flipper design, it would be ideal. I mean, if there was just a small tab, again, this is running on IKBS bearings, so if there was a tiny, I mean, just a really small flipper tab, I mean, this knife it's just dying to be a flipper, in my opinion. This knife should have been a flipper. They could have kept, you know, this completely flat, no thumb stud, just a very small flipper, which would then give you, you know, a small, you know, protrusion of the flipper up front for kind of a finger guard, if you will. The ergonomics, when it's fully deployed, are fine. It's perfectly comfortable. There's no hot spots. Perfectly usable. So functionality wise, it's a perfectly fine knife. I just will not personally be EDCing this knife because it hurts the hell out of my thumbs and my palms for me to open it. So with that said, that's kind of my thoughts on the CRKT CEO. Love the concept, love the form factor and the aesthetics. It just doesn't work for me personally. I don't want that to discourage you from trying one out. Again, at a $40 price point, it may be worth a shot just to see how you like it. And maybe the deployment issue that I've had will just not even be an issue for you whatsoever. So that's my mileage on this particular knife. It's gonna go into the case and live there until I decide what to do with it. If you think I should give this away, put it in the comments. If you think I should give it to my dad, put that in the comments. So that's it. That's the CRKT CEO. Again, it's 2.1 ounces, 3.1 inch blade. Comes in at about $40, and could be a good option for some people. It's just not for me. But I am glad that I tried it, and we'll see what ends up happening with this knife in the future. With that said, again, quick reminder, if I didn't mention this already, we've got less than 24 hours until the giveaway, the 100 subscriber giveaway closes. So at 11:59 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time on Saturday night, so February 2nd, 11:59 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time is when all submissions end for the 100 subscriber giveaway. But the good news is, and I'll probably post a couple more videos before this happens, but I do have another giveaway planned in the near future, and I already have the items in hand. And I'll give you a quick teaser. I bought 8 identical knives. And you may think that's crazy, and there was a specific reason for it, and I'll get into that when that giveaway comes around here in the next couple weeks. But I bought 8 identical knives, at least identical model, and I'm keeping 4 and I'm giving 4 away. Bought them with my own money for a very specific reason, and you'll understand more when that video comes. So stay tuned for some more upcoming content. Don't forget about the giveaway. Please do like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to check out the links in the description below for the other 2 subscribers that I mentioned earlier, Emery and Frederick. Take a look at their channels. With that said, that's all I've got for you guys this evening. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.